conversation except just sitting. So I thought I might have given you wrong impression about the artist. So I just want to make sure that I'm not saying, I guess I could sit with this, I could stand, I'm going to sit, that you have to have a husband who's molested your children in order to be an artist. No. What? And what I'm saying about Alice Munro, you have to look at Proust, okay? So Proust was this French writer, one of the greatest writers who ever lived. I've only read part of it, unfortunately, but I've read some enough to know that he's pretty good. And he stayed sick. He's a big fag, of course, but he stayed sick in his room for his whole life. And he never hardly went out ever. He never do nothing. Or there's like T.S. Eliot, who worked in a bank. And he was a pretty good guy too. Pretty good writer. So what is this? Well, my theory is that, so what does Proust do? He writes the novel about his mother serving him a cookie when he was 5. And he writes a huge chapter about the gorgeousness of the Madeleine, which was the name of the cookie. And but it's because the incidents he did have in his life, he felt them incredibly deeply. And he was extremely sensitive. And I think that artists are extremely sensitive. That doesn't mean that they're nice or they're sensitive about other people. It really means that they have a lot of feelings that they don't know what the fuck to do with, that would drive them mad if they didn't put it down. And the final thing I want to say was I recommend, before I introduce the second Bruce of the evening, it's an evening of Bruces. The audience doesn't all have to be Bruce, don't worry, you're okay. But is to just recommend the interview on TV with Margaret Atwood. Did anybody see it? Very good. That boring guy on TV, what's his name? Steve Paikin. Yes, you hardly. Oh my God, Steve is very boring. But they did this wonderful interview with her, and she talks about the French Revolution. She says, "We are back there again. The gap between the rich and the poor is so gigantic, and this is what happens when there's all these people, and then there's all these CEOs, which is why they shot that guy. Why they got so excited about shooting that CEO is because a lot of people feel very, very powerless right now in the world, everywhere. And it used to be just in the third world, but now in whatever you call our world, people feel powerless too. So anyway, she talked about that, and she talked about, and what I like about her was that she said lots of really incorrect things. And she said, and she's a writer who was almost canceled. And somehow they couldn't cancel Margaret Atwood, probably because she was making a lot of money on TV. But okay, will you please welcome my second Bruce, but it's not the secondary Bruce. He's going to perform for you a little bit from his upcoming novel, Mrs. Mackenzie, Bruce Beaton. Yeah!
This novel that I've written takes place about
Thank you to the
50 yards from where we are all gathered this evening at a little house on Bond Street. That is called Mackenzie House Museum.
It's haunted, right?
Great question. I'm not going to give away the ending.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the ghost.
Yes. The premise of the novel is that somebody who works there finds a small little bundle of letters in the attic one day. And I'll just leave it at that, and we'll go from there as to what this is all about.
Just make sure, is he speaking into the microphone?
Am I speaking into the
You
microphone?
can get right into it. We can hear you, but you can get right into it. Yeah.
Try not to do this.
Right up into that microphone.
Okay, we're good?
Yeah.
Been a long time since rock and roll. No, that's not part of it. Thank you. I went back upstairs to the change room, and I retrieved the letters. I got my notebook and a pencil from my bag. I needed a clear open, well-lit workspace. The best place for this in our dark little Victorian row house was down in the basement, or as we call it, the day room. This is the room where we imagine the Mackenzies spent most of their time. It is part of their kitchen. I turned up the dimmer on the modern electric lights as high as I could, and I sat down at the table with the letters. So, what was this? I opened the stiff plastic wrap. The first letter in the pile, the one I had looked at upstairs, was addressed to Mackenzie on November the 17th, 1823. I held it carefully. The paper, made from rag, not from wood pulp, felt smooth. I flipped it over to see who had written it. The signature on the bottom said, "Your humble and poetry-loving neighbor," American spelling of neighbor, "Laura Ingersoll Secord." What the? The top half of the pile was all in the same handwriting. This was a pile of letters written to Mackenzie, all from Laura frickin' Secord.
Jesus.
Halfway through the pile, the handwriting changed. The first one in this new handwriting, addressed to Mrs. Secord, was also dated November the 17th, 1823. It was signed, "Your newly arrived Scottish neighbor, W.L. Mackenzie." My pulse quickened. This was huge. I had both sides of the correspondence. You never get both sides of the correspondence. I didn't know much about Laura Secord. Anyone who has spent any time in Ontario has seen her famous chocolate store that is named after her. Some marketing savvy entrepreneur knew that she would be a good person to use to sell candy, but when I was a kid, I thought it was actually her store. I knew a little bit about her famous walk in the War of 1812. Her intel led to a significant British victory over the vastly superior American forces at the Battle of Beaver Dams. Our entrenched colonial narrative holds Laura up as an example of female courage in a national history that is dominated by the exploits of men. I knew that she lived in Queenston at the same time as the Mackenzies lived there. It was a small town. They must have known each other, but what were these letters? As I was about to lay them out in chronological order, the clouds outside burst, and a heavy summer rain pounded down on the house. A bright flash of lightning lit up the basement, and the electric lights flickered. The boom of thunder was so loud that I felt it had actually hit the house, and I instinctively ducked my head. The temperature in the room dropped, and a cool breeze rustled the letters in my hand. It blew the first one I had laid out on the table onto the floor. The windows were not open. The hair across my scalp tightened. My eyes widened and my breathing became shallow. My ears pulled back and up. I slowly bent down to retrieve the letter, and when I stood up, I saw her. She was sitting in the corner with her back to me. She was wearing a tight black Victorian dress, and she was braiding her hair. She quickly tucked the braid up into her white bonnet. Yes, a ghost. She hovered in the chair. I could see right through her. My pulse was racing. I had never seen a ghost before. Like I said, my father sees ghosts all the time, but I figured I hadn't inherited the sensitivity needed to see across the spectral divide. I didn't think ghosts were even visible during daylight hours, but now I know they are. There she was, glowing. Her head snapped round to face me. I gasped and stepped back. She said, "I need you to read me those letters." Her dry voice was from another world. It had a crisp, clipped Scottish accent. Her jaw was tight. Her brow was furrowed and her eyes dug into me. I immediately recognized her. We sell buttons in our gift shop with her face on them. It was Mackenzie's wife, Isabel Baxter Mackenzie. More? Should I keep going? I got a little more. Yeah. Little more.
That's great. Chapter 6.
You need me to... Are you deaf? Her look sharpened. I'm a little confused. I can see that. I need you to read me those letters. You can't read? It had never occurred to me that Mackenzie's wife couldn't read. Rates of literacy in Scotland when she was born were the highest in Europe. She had been married to a man who had tried to use the written word to change the world. She couldn't read. Perhaps perhaps the high rates of literacy were among men, and my statistics had a gender bias. Of course I can read. My husband was a journalist. Our life together would have been much more vexatious if I couldn't read. But I can't read here. Her hand swept up in frustration. I had never seen a ghost before, let alone talked to one. It had never occurred to me that they would be granted the ability to do certain things, but denied others. Sure, they could walk through walls and all that other stuff, but reading, why would reading be denied? I had to ask. Why can't you read where you are? I do not know the mysteries of God's handiwork are not yet known to me. Nothing is explained here. She paused and looked around the room before she continued. There are some pages of the eternal book I cannot see. Perhaps this is a test of my faith. I don't know. I need you to read me those letters so I can finally cross over. Okay. I shrugged. Okay. Okay. What does that mean? Okay means all right. It means I understand. Okay. Why those two particular letters? I don't know. Was this expression not used during your lifetime? Will you read me the letters, the correspondence that you have before you, please? Her eyes were a pale deep blue and so wide open, two little windows to her soul. Her initial sternness had faded. She was sad. Only a real brute could have denied her this, and though you have seen I can be a little sneaky, I am no brute. Okay, let me ask you this. Are you Isabel Baxter Mackenzie, or the spirit of Isabel Baxter Mackenzie? When you were alive, were you married to the radical journalist William Lyon Mackenzie? I am, and I was, though I preferred it when he was referred to as a reform journalist. The tarring of him as a radical made it very difficult for our family. His radicalism arose out of his belief in reform. He grew into it. He tried and tried again and again, first with his newspaper and then as an elected official. He tried to change the government within the bounds of the laws under which we had lived. She sighed and then continued. I did support this so-called radicalism, not at first, but I did come to believe it and what it entailed. His radicalism grew from a few basic and humane principles. It was difficult. That is the impression we get by what was left behind. I thought she might start to weep, but she clenched her jaw, pulled up her head, and whispered, "Read me those letters." Is there something in these letters that is preventing you from crossing over? Did Mackenzie have an affair? A dalliance? Did he with Mrs. Mackenzie? Her hand swept up and from across the room. She knocked me off my feet. I lay on the floor, still clutching my letters. Yes, they were my letters now. As I caught my breath, Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division was going through my head. I was certain she wouldn't find this amusing. I sat up and looked over at her, and she was weeping. She was dangerous. I needed to be careful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beaton, to differentiate you from the other Bruce. So, yeah, I know we have to be careful, and this is related to what I'm first going to ask you, because you are, or were, or this we have to talk, no, you are still an actor, as people can see from that reading, I think. And so if I know when I was talking to you earlier, because sometimes I talk to my guests earlier, you started to talk like me. So if you find that happens to you, I won't be insulted.
You won't be?
See? And whatever my fucking accent is, he does it better than I do. Anyway, so if that happens, I won't be insulted. But you don't have to. I'm just saying, I don't want you to feel, uh-oh, what is going on with this? There it's going. It used to be tipping. Can you just see, Ryan, if it's why it's tipping?
Get it
because
right in
I'm
your
touching
face,
it.
right
I
in
just
the
have to
face.
stop touching it, but I get it. That's
Move it real
what
close.
the actress said to the bishop. Okay, so I met you when you now I met you years ago, or I heard from Sky Gilbert. Now it's very complicated, the Sky Gilbert Spizzy business, but Sky is this guy who gets into trouble, but Spizzy doesn't get into any trouble because he's a fictional
Angel, she's
character.
an angel.
But anyway, I heard of you as actor for Buddies in Bedtime Theater. And here you're writing a novel, and I think some other things came in between there. So that's the first thing I wanted to ask you was, because you are a writer, actor, and aren't you also kind of a historical person?
Yes. I would lump them all under the general umbrella of storytelling.
Of course, the storyteller.
Storytelling. So for years ago, I had written a play about Mackenzie and the rebellions of 1837. If I'm ringing any bells with your grade 10 or your grade 8
I remember that.
curriculum, you might remember them. They happened just up the road here, Young and Eglinton, on a cold winter day in December 1837. And I was always fascinated by this story. I was like, what the actual fuck happened there? So I started digging into it, researching it, and I wrote a play about Mackenzie, and somehow from that I started digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the history of this place.
But what, see, that's where I wouldn't have, I'm not saying it's not a valid thing to be interested in.
I think that you are. I think you are, Spizzy. I think you are saying something.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that, but when you say that, then you heard that, and then you had to know what was the actual. So what was it that caused you to dive deep at that moment? You understand what I mean? Like, because with me, I just go, what was it that caught your interest, or what is there about the history that we didn't know?
I think we might say an inciting moment in the journey. Yeah, I think that the idea that a bunch of farmers picked up weapons and marched into town to try to overthrow the government. I was like, what happened there? And that just got me going. And then I wrote this play, and then I started digging deeper into the history of this place. I'm from here, and every time I turn around, I'm finding things about this place I did not know.
Hang Mike Pence.
Is what, sorry?
Hang Mike Pence.
That's a whole different thing. Oh, I see. And that's what they were doing. That's a good point. Is he saying? In other words, he's saying that happened at the Capitol in the United States of America. That people came and went.
Well, it's an interesting comparison to make between the radicalisms of a bunch of farmers in the 1830s and the things that were going on. I don't quite agree with...
No, it might not be the same thing, but it's ordinary people who decide to take up arms at some point.
I mean, so I dug deeper into it, and then I went back to school and I did that Master's in Museum Studies program at U of T, and then I interviewed at Mackenzie House, and I got a job there. And there's a profound difference between telling the story of the rebellions of 1837 with the actors on the stage, like I did, and telling those stories in the room where he died. There's a different resonance.
So you kind of went there to be in the house, to experience that place.
Yeah.
Did you see ghosts?
It's a great question. Did I see a ghost? I get asked that a lot of the time, and I have never seen a ghost before there. Right? Friends of mine have. I've seen some weird stuff happen, but actually, I've never seen a ghost. It's famous. It's famous for being haunted. There's a lot of stories about it. We're a stop on ghost tours, and that's in this novel. The frustration of somebody who's like, "Stop with the ghosts." Stop it. Let's talk about the history. He was important. This is why, right? And then suddenly, right? He meets a.
But I think that the concept of the history and the ghost, I think, says something very profound, and it was related to what I was wanting to ask you about. Because to me, is history a ghost and itself, and does history live with us the way a ghost might, in the sense of, do you know what I mean? Like in the sense of like, and because the bigger question was actually, I think we're living in a period where nobody gives a flying fuck about history.
Yes.
Right?
Well, it's a great question. Like it's a great question and a great sort of idea. Do people give a fuck about history? And I guess I'm in the business of trying to meet that need to have people be excited about it and be interested in it. But I would say that maybe some of that is history's, the way it's being communicated is a lack of relevance. If it's not relevant, then who the fuck cares, right?
So why is this, I'm not challenging you,
No,
but why is this story relevant, do you think? Or what, is it something you feel or something you also think?
This particular novel, or the story of the rebellion?
The whole thing. Or is it something you're discovering as you write it?
No. I think that the relevance of what happened then is still part of our terrain in terms of there's a whole tradition in museums that comes out of what we might call a cabinet of curiosities, right? Look at this kind of cool thing that I stole from a bunch of people in this land, right? And I've got a lot of money. So that whole thing about cool, interesting, weird stuff is part of the history of museums, and I think part of that is in here as well. But some people think that history is crap. I mean, like someone like James Brown, for instance. James Brown famously in that documentary on Netflix said, history's my enemy, which I get, right? Right? For someone like James Brown, I don't agree with his politics. I don't agree with his label practices. And I don't agree with the way he treated the people he was married to. But that's an interesting thing to say. So the relevance of the rebellions, I mean, it's got all kinds of different relevances, but part of it is to shift and reimagine this place,
Right.
where we are. Like, what is the history of this place? And so when I walk through the streets of this place, I'm like, oh yeah, that street didn't go there, or those streets wouldn't go. Like, there's a reprinting.
Well,
of the
to
history
me,
of
there's two things I think about Toronto, because I moved here when I was 12 years old from the United States of America, and I was the American in the junior high school, very loud and strange person. So I see it as a kind of Toronto, so there's Toronto's the good, which is something that we hear about very much. There's also what I came in as American, and I went, well, Canadians have a peaceful history. There is no, Americans are the impetus for America is violence.
Yeah,
right? The Tea Party is the thing that,
Yeah.
But there is this, anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, historically, the way we broke away from the colonial powers is different, and one of the reasons for that is who kind of settled here originally in Toronto at that time. The first wave of settlers who came here, the Jarvises, the McDougalls.
My partner, Sky Gilbert's partner has that name, Jarvis.
Jarvis,
it's a historical name.
Do we want to get into Jarvis? Maybe not right now.
They're very I think Jarvis is
let's
very
get into fucking Jarvis right now. Let's go with the Jarvis.
So they are one of our sisters.
Oh yeah,
Jarvis.
absolutely.
That's why Jarvis
William Jarvis was. He fought in the American Revolution against the Americans, was on the losing side of that war, and he came up here, a political refugee in many ways, and he was rewarded when he got here with lots of land, great government job, didn't ask a lot of him, and a privileged position within this world. There was a big chunk of them, and they go on to form a little corrupt clique that Mackenzie called the Family Compact.
Right.
And the reason that they were so well treated is because the person who set up the way the government worked here in 1793 was a guy named Simcoe. John Graves Simcoe, Sir John Graves Simcoe. And Simcoe fought in that American Revolution as well, right? He was in that war, and he was on the losing side of that war. He was at Yorkton when they signed that that scandalous, that shameful surrender agreement, right? It was like the slap in the face to British honor. It was like, fuck you, right? And they came up here with their tails between their legs and they're feeling ashamed and they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So what does he do? He entrenches a ruling elite. He treats them really well so they won't be pissed off, so they will never rebel against the British.
Now, because it's interesting because I see my American history as an American. I understand that the people who settled there in the US of A, they were crazy. They were Puritans. Like they were the people who got kicked out of England because they wore hair shirts and they used to beat themselves and say, no music! Yeah. No fucking, never mind fucking, no music, no fun, right? And they settled Virginia and everything in Massachusetts and the witches and the whole thing. So, but Canada isn't quite the same people.
No.
Which I think is very interesting. Maybe one of the reasons why we are living here and it's not quite so bad unless we become the 51st state. But you know what I mean? So those kind of origins are very important. Now I want to ask you about one more thing. So I do find it very fascinating. That I hear you here, and I hear you're making history interesting to me just by performing when you perform when you speak. So you were an actor, but I think that you still are. He indicated to me he still is.
You can act, you can do it.
So lately, are you ready for this? This guy this impresses me because I'm like an old trashy faggot from loves Hollywood. Yeah. He was in the what's it called? The Apprentice?
It's called
what?
The Apprentice. Yeah.
He is in The Apprentice, and guess who he played in that? He did not play Donald Trump. He did not play who's the big guy?
Ray Cohen.
Ray Cohen. He played Andy Warhol in that movie.
You can see that.
This guy, he just did that. He's another movie star. So you have to tell me about this. I'm so fascinated. First of all, you have to tell me, now don't you ever now look at me. I am here. I am driving people crazy because I'm, using the back room here. It's the Imperial Public Library. One Thursday a month, please do come. It's the second Thursday of the month. And I'm using it to perform because I have this bug. So you are a historian, but then you just ran a movie. And when I hear you do this, I go, but I want Bruce also to act. So how do these two things happen? The historian and the actor.
They happen through luck and weirdness. I would say. It was weird. I'm going to say it was weird playing Andy Warhol in that movie. It was just strange.
Well, I want to know about that. First of all, did you act or see or come anywhere near Jeremy Strong?
Yes, I did.
I love Jeremy Strong. I mean, I think he's a wonderful actor. You know who the Jeremy Strong is?
Yeah.
He played one of the brothers in Succession. The craziest. Well, they're hard to say because they're all crazy, but the crazy brother. He was the drug addict. Oh my God, what a great part, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so then when I heard he was going to be in this movie, I'm like, anything to see Jeremy Strong. So what's he like? Was he nice to you?
He was, and he is brilliant, and the way they shot it was kind of interesting to me. It was all handheld, the stuff I did, and they were just kind of improvising as they were going. So there's throwing things in, and I was like, I'm doing things, and I'm improvising, and I'm like, that's how it all kind of came together. So when he's in improv mode, because he does that sort of method thing, he's deeply in it.
Yeah.
He's way in it, and so he's just like living it and breathing it. He was brilliant. Sebastian Stan, brilliant.
Who's he? He's a Trumpy?
He plays Trump, yeah.
Oh yeah.
He was great, I thought, and super nice. Like nice guy.
Now, I find that the people, now this is just me not knowing many talented people, but the people who are really talented are, not knowing famous people, know lots of talented people, but the people who are really talented are actually quite nice.
Yeah.
You find that the people who aren't very talented are strangely the ones who are really awful. But anyway, so, pardon me?
Bitter.
Yeah, of course, because they're bitter and jealous and climbing their way. But the talented people, they have a certain whatever. Yeah. I mean, that sounds very elitist, but I found that to be quite true. And so, what I want to know more about this thing about the improvising. So you say that because it interests me because I think a lot of what we see, like for instance, I know on Curb Your Enthusiasm, he's working in a mode where I'm pretty sure he just gives scenarios.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm pretty sure too. My suspicion is that the gang, to the actors. You don't know what I mean. They give a scenario to the actors, and then they improvise their way through it. And he wants people who can do that, which makes me think that Cheryl Hines. Oh, what's her name? Hines.
The
wife of. Are you ready? Why is
RFK
Cheryl Hines
Jr.
the wife of RFK? We can't figure that out. But anyway. So, sorry, just a moment of confusion that came over me. But, she's, obviously, she can do that. I watched them play together, else he would not have hired her if she could not do that kind of thing. So, but I'm saying, and then I look at, what are their names? Oh, well, that whole gang around them. Oh, God, I'm old and I forget, that's the first thing that goes in your brain is the Hollywood names. But that bunch of guys somebody help me. The recent movie, The End, with all the movie stars in it who are pals and they're guys. What's that? Anybody from that group? You don't know. Anyway, a lot of Hollywood guys, it seems to me, they can do the improv.
Yeah.
And they do seem to be, and I wonder sometimes I'm watching like Ryan, not this Ryan, Reynolds.
Yeah.
I think probably he's a really witty guy.
No, he's humorless.
Oh, he is. Anyway, but I'm suspecting that some of these people do this kind of thing. So, how was it presented? It just happened, or
it was encouraged by the director. One of the ways he
sort of openly said, if you want to sort of take it in a certain way.
Let's try it that way. And I struggled with it because I can improv stuff, sure, right? Done those sort of classes and did collectives with Paul Thompson, which is all improv based. But
it's so funny you mentioned that. But then we go on.
Okay. But improvising as Andy, like there was a script, luckily, so I could fall back onto it as we were going. But improvising it as Andy was a bit of a challenge.
Of course,
absolutely, right. So there was a little bit of less improv from me than there was from Jeremy Strong.
That's amazing that he had that. No, I think you mentioned Pasquarone. I remember I was at, I don't know, what did you do there with them? What collective did you do? Can you remember?
I did a play called The Rediscovery of Sex.
When was that?
It was 1999.
Did you have to take your clothes off and have a sex stuff? Are you serious? Did you have to have sex? Did you have to do something close to sex?
There was some sex stuff.
Reenactment.
And what year was that?
That was 1999.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so they were still rediscovering sex back then.
Because he had done, Paul Thompson, if you don't know, Paul Thompson is kind of the granddaddy of collective creation.
And of Canadians, one of the granddaddies of Canadians.
He's in all the textbooks, for sure. And he was one of the first people to start telling Canadian stories in a theatrical setting. Yeah. And because up until about 1968, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that most theater here was American or British.
Even Toronto Workshop Productions was based on John Littlewood in England. And here was the first time, though there was Bill Glasgow, but I think first was Paul.
Yeah, and so he started creating these plays through they call it writing with your feet. It's an improvisational thing. You bring in stuff and you turn it into theater as you're going. And in 1976, he had done a show called I Love You, Baby Blue.
Yeah, so he did porn show.
Yeah,
when was 70s?
That was it was 76.
Yeah.
And it was banned.
The police came in.
The police came because he said blowjob. Someone said blowjob. And when he talks about it, it's hilarious to actually hear about what the actual details of the charges were. Welcome to Toronto, Victorian Toronto, right? The bones. Anyway, and it was a huge success. So he had this idea that he was going to do this thing again. He perceived a paradigm shift.
Oh, so it was on Blue.
It was a similar
Baby
process.
Blue or something. It was based on that.
It was a similar process, but it didn't quite work, in my humble opinion. And my opinion is that in 1976, it was just enough to see it. That was just enough. No. It's in front of us. Oh, there it is. That was enough for theater to happen.
Yes.
But by 1999, I think that it's not enough to see it. We could see it everywhere.
Right. It's on our cell phone. There was cell phone, but on the
whatever. It's like the accessibility to it was way different.
Well,
so we want the audiences wanted something different, and because Paul was still directing it, we brought those sensibilities into it of just seeing it, and we didn't add any meaning.
But I have to tell you this one anecdote, and that was my one experience with Paul. I was almost in a play that was directed by Paul Thompson. I'm so sorry I didn't do it, but I just couldn't at the time. But when we had the reading, this is so Paul Thompson, this is what he was. But this is the thing, he's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So no one knew what he was saying. I didn't understand half of what he said to me. Like he'd come up to me after seeing one of my plays and he'd give me an interpretation of it. And I would go, thank you, Paul. I have no idea what you just said. But anyway, so we're sitting around having a reading. Before the reading starts, he goes, we're going to do a reading. And I was playing Noel Coward. I was so excited. I was playing Noel Coward. And I was going to do my part. I could be Noel Coward. And then he goes, okay, so what we're going to do is just read the part, the line that you want to read. So in other words, anybody, if you find the lines that you like, you read that line. You're not going to read Noel Sky, you're not going to read Noel Coward's lines, you're going to just read, well, you might, if you feel like it, but you just, can you believe it? I'm really laughing because it's like, oh my God, I don't know how I got through that reading. And it was all, it was
What was your line? What was your line?
Well, I can't remember, but I mean, I had a really good line as Noel Coward. I was going to steal the goddamn show. Yeah. But no, I'm not allowed to do that. I have to just, someone else could do it. It was so strange. And that was another way of work, like that's part of that whole kind of...
Hippies.
Well, yeah, exactly, hippies. I mean, the old theater past Marai warm-up was... that was what the joke used to be, right? Yeah. But anyway, so you came from that, but it sounds like you've seamless. It sounds like you have made a life where you are both a historian and also so it sounds to me like I just want to ask this. Sorry, this is the final question. Yeah. Do you think the spirit world is there? Are you a spiritual person? Is that what ghosts is about?
I do believe that when we shuffle off this mortal coil when we die, to quote somebody, that's not the end of the story. I believe there's something else. I don't know what it is.
Especially because we don't have to do laundry anymore.
That's right, we don't have to do the laundry.
Shuffling off the mortal laundry coil, for sure, right? Which is great. I still have a laundromat.
Butt stuff.
No, I think that on that note, because that's a hopeful note, not that we don't like our bodies are important, and we get so wrapped up in them sometimes, and that's a whole other topic. But then we have the spirit. And the spirit is important too. And that's why I've had these two, let me shake our hand, poets here to read for you. And that's what we do here at Spizzy. Could you please applause for Mr. Bruce?
Yeah!
Thank you very much. And you're competing for the Guernica Prize with this book?
I was, the novel was nominated, was shortlisted for the Guernica. I didn't win.
Oh, fuck them!
I didn't win.
Well, then might they still publish it if you submit it to
it's
them?
not over. So if anyone's an acquiring editor from a decent, or even not decent, publishing house tonight, talk to me after.
Thank you very much.
I'll add you.
Bye, everybody.